Hello and welcome to The Gift of Addiction. Today I am with my friend Katie, who is also known as Veda Devi, and thanks for coming, Katie.
You're welcome. I'm happy to be here.
I will explain the circumstances of us coming together today for the audience. Katie is a friend of mine and we met in recovery. I've heard her story a few times, and given that I'm now doing this show on addiction, I thought she'd be an excellent person to interview. Katie is also known as Veda Devi, as I said. So what's with the Veda Devi, if you don't mind me asking?
So it's a name I was given by, dare I say it, a guru. My dear friend and teacher, a woman called Shakti Durga. So she is a woman that is a spiritual teacher, spiritual master, who has a school called Shanti Mission. And look, it's a really old tradition to be given a name. And what it means is it's what my soul is aspiring to be. You know, it's like it's like something to aim for. And so Veda, the Vedas, which you know about from meditation, is the supreme consciousness. And it was cognized and brought to earth by the rishis in India after meditating for thousands of years. And they, it's now, written text, but it was actually just a verbal transmission from teacher to student. And then, so Veda, the supreme consciousness, and Devi means the goddess. So as my guru in India would say, so the goddess of supreme consciousness.
Okay.
Yeah.
I've heard a little bit about the rishis. Correct me if I'm wrong, but wasn't it Shiva was the Adi yogi, the first
the ultimate
yogi?
The ultimate rishi, the ultimate yogi.
Was it him, or was he was the one who taught the seven rishis?
Yes.
Is that right?
Yes.
Okay, so you probably know a whole lot more about all
Yes
of this
and
than
no,
me.
like I'm still learning. I've read many books and I've been to many classes and I've had many teachers. So, but the interesting thing about these teachings is that quite a lot of them contradict, right? So, and what I've come to understand about that is that because it's talking about the divine, it's talking about consciousness, it's talking about something that us human minds could actually never really fathom. So in the stories contradicting itself, it's for us to not get attached to any one story, because it's a forever changing, ever growing, ever evolving energy that, we could never actually fully fathom. And I think that has been the age-old quest of humans to understand God, to understand the divine. And we can't. We just can't. It's too much for our teeny tiny little brains.
Sure.
I think it's something that we can definitely experience. We can have feelings of it, like I love through recovery. I can't remember if it's in one of the books, but that feeling of awe that we get, when we look at a star-filled sky or a dawn, when the sun just breaks over the horizon, those moments where you just have that connection to something greater and you think there's got to be something really beautiful creating this. It can't just be a whole bunch of matter smushed together.
I'm already going to love this conversation. It's going to go... This is exact, but I'm afraid we're going too deep too quickly.
It happens with me. I mean, with that name, Veda Devi, I do kind of go to those places. But you can rein me back in.
The extent of my knowledge on this is limited to what I've been doing is the Vedic meditation. I know a little bit about the background.
This is not a limit. This is very, very vast.
But we will get back to that. I would love to, because you know the topic about man's thirst for knowledge, or the desire to know God, or the nature of existence, whatever you want to call it, is pretty interesting stuff. But let's go back to your story, if we can, because as you know, this is hopefully going to reach addicts or alcoholics or people living with addicts or alcoholics, and by telling your story, you can prove that recovery is possible and you just accept things. So why don't we start? You grew up here in Sydney?
Yep, I did. just around the corner.
Around the corner.
From where we are now.
In beautiful Sydney.
Yeah.
And tell me, so what age did you think addiction or alcoholism manifest in your life, or what were the events that preceded that? You said something about, so I'll let you tell the story. But
yeah, sure. It's hard to know when something like this really seeps in, because I truly believe that this ailment/gift, it's an out of control ego, you know. It's and I believe that part of self really takes over through trauma, through the environment in which the child is being brought up in. And you know, as I said before we started, I in no way want to talk poorly of my parents, because I really believe they were amazing and are amazing. They're still alive, thank God. They're beautiful, very heart-centered human beings, and just like any other human being, they're doing the best they can with what they had, you know. I believe my father's father, I've learned just recently, I don't want to label someone that hasn't actually made that decision for themselves. So let's just say my grandfather was a heavy drinker. He sounded like he was quite an angry, he sounded like he had a few issues himself, and that affects a child. And so, of course, that affected my father. And, you know, my father, he does like a drink, and perhaps more, from my perspective, he drinks more than what I would like him to, but that's my judgment, and I've got to stop doing that, you know, because he's living his own life, and he's been an amazing father. He's raised me, he's, you know, given me a roof over my head. I live with him right now as I've been sorting my life out over the past 4 years and starting university, and he's been helping pay for some of that. So, you know, I really have a lot to be thankful for with him. But I would say with his drinking and you know, the age in which my parents grew up, it wasn't encouraged to do any self-inquiry, you know, whereas our generation is a little bit more encouraged to get therapy, to do meditation, to talk about your feelings. Our parents weren't given that opportunity. It was go to work, get a wife, husband, get a mortgage, get on with it. You know, pull your socks up and get on with it. And you know, we're not designed to be like that. We're human beings with feelings and emotions and pain and trauma, and we need to connect and talk about that stuff. So I digress, but I think with that home life of two human beings that hadn't had those opportunities, they projected their stuff onto me as their child. And you know, my mother was a perfectionist, still is. She's calmed down a lot since I've sorted my stuff out. I think she's seeing that there's another way of being through the way I'm existing now, which is such a gift.
So what you're doing now
it's had a ripple effect.
Her,
definitely.
Yeah.
I mean, she doesn't drink now, and she was really drinking quite heavily for a period there. But yeah, I remember always at school feeling just not good enough. I always felt, I mean, gosh, I remember being in year 1 and looking at a girl. She was sitting in front of me and she had this really thin wrist, and her watch, I know the detail as well, I can see it, and the watch on her wrist was on the last notch, like it was, so it would be the smallest band, and it was still too big on her wrist. And I thought, gosh, why can't my wrist look like that? And it's a really clear memory of just constant comparison to the other little girls. I would have these moments where I'd be in that real metacognition of thought, you know, where I could see myself thinking, why can't I seem to be happy, joyous and free like the other girls? They seem to just be really free. Whereas a lot of the time I was really in my head, unless I was being the class clown. When I was being the class clown, there was a bit of freedom there. But I suppose I was still getting the love and adoration of my peers, right? So, you know, high school goes on, you know, boys start to come into the picture, and And I think as young girls, we're really made to believe that we are okay if we have a boyfriend or if we have a man like wooing us or liking us, or we're being sought after as females. And I was a real sports nut in school. I was an elite athlete. I was a rower. I was looking to possibly go into state teams and things like that. I think I held the record at my school for like 15 years or something. Someone only just
for rowing?
For one of my times. I can't remember if it was an erg or a scull or something, but this girl beat it maybe, I don't know, 7 years ago or something, and we found out about it. Anyway.
Went for a while?
Yeah. So I love my parents still hold on to that was like this real amazing achievement. Again, that I feel like that's a real sign of those times, is that, to be any good, you had to be achieving something.
Okay.
And I really felt that, I really felt I was loved and seen by my parents when I was achieving.
And in Australia, with the culture, achieving in sport would be as good as anything, wouldn't it? I mean...
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
For sure. So, but then I guess my real demise into drugs and alcohol came when I was 17. So this period of time, I was actually going to try out for the New South Wales rowing team. I can't remember exactly, but I just remember I had trials the next morning. My friends and I were at a party. I was the only sober person out of our group. Another girl was meant to drive, and I saw her drinking, and there's this part of me that's like, oh yes, I said that, oh, I would drive, and aren't I good? But there was also this part of me that wanted to be the hero. So there's always two sides to a story. And if we get really honest about our lives, we can see where the ego comes into play, and we're never just a victim. There's always different facets to every event that's happened, and that's one of the gifts from getting sober that I've learnt. That I can take responsibility for every single part of my life. So seeing this girl drink, I said to the girl who owned the car, I said, look, I think I should drive tonight. She said, okay, we'll get the keys out of my bag. And then it was some time after, and I needed to go. I had the trials the next morning, and I said to the group, let's go. And we got down to the car, and we had lied to two of our girlfriends that we were getting a taxi up there, but they saw the car in the car park when they arrived, and they said, well, you have to give us a lift home. So we were already one person over. And then my friend who owned the car came down to the car with two other boys from the party saying, we're going to give them a lift. And I wasn't happy about it. We definitely was too many people in the car. Yep. It was a small car.
Yep.
It was late at night. Everyone was intoxicated. I was just ready to go.
Yep.
So, we jumped in the car, and we drove. We took off from the party, and, on the way to the entrance to get us back down to the main road, we were just singing, having a good time. Once we got down to this road that we had to go down, my mind has actually blocked any names of roads or where it was. I know I can find out, but I actually don't want to. I don't need to. Maybe I will at some point, but I think I've done a lot of deep diving around this event. It was extremely traumatic. Yeah. It's just something I haven't done, so I can't tell you exactly where it was. But we went down this road, and look, after the accident, we found out that the road had been tapered out, not tapered in, with the rain. And also at 17, I had no understanding of ballistics and the mechanics of a car. So, with the weight in the back, there was no traction on the front wheels, wet road, it was raining. Mm-hmm. We fishtailed, the wheel locked. I couldn't move the wheel, but the car was fishtailing. The girls in the back were saying, stop, stop. It wasn't me. I wasn't doing anything with the wheel. We crashed, and the car ricocheted and hit a tree at the back and killed the 2 boys in the back instantly.
Yep.
And I was knocked out. I woke up on the wheel, and we don't need to get into the gruesome what I saw and everything, but you know, I was charged with a number of different charges, and you know, I had to be formally arrested, and which was traumatic in itself. You know, I'd already seen dead bodies. I'd woken up in a hospital. You know, I knew when I woke up in the hospital, and my parents were there, and a friend was there, and they all had tear-streamed faces. I just said, "The boys," and they just started crying, and I knew that they were dead. And you know, that period of my life was horrendous. I can't even begin to explain the pain that I was in, and you know, I don't think I spoke for a while. It's interesting that I know you wanted to talk about spirituality. As a child, I was extremely connected to a higher realm of consciousness. I used to talk about God all the time. I would pray. My parents, and like, they don't. I remember when I asked my mum, "What happens when you die?" She said, "Oh, you just get buried in a hole." Mm-hmm. I was like, "What do you mean? There's nothing else?" I'm like, "What? So it's just black forever?" She was like, "Yep." I knew that wasn't right, you know. And I used to speak to angels. If people had died, that were close to us, I'd write poetry to the family saying that the angels had them, and it was a knowing. It wasn't like some story I'd created. It was a knowing in my heart that that's what happened. And so when this event happened, when this accident happened, I felt, it was like I felt this like layer of me get pulled out of me. It was a visceral, physical experience, and I don't know how else to explain it, but it was like an essence of me got pulled out. Mm-hmm. And I was desperately trying to grab it. And
how long after the event itself was this a process that sort of?
I remember being in my room, maybe I want to say a couple of weeks, because I probably was in PTSD, severe PTSD afterwards. So I don't remember much of those first couple of weeks. I mean, beautiful people were coming with flowers and like cooking us food, and a girlfriend made me pajamas. It was really sweet. But I remember being in my room and I felt this energy leave me. And I remember just being like, oh my God, it's gone. Like that thing that I'd always had my whole life that I didn't quite understand, but I just knew it was God. It felt like it had been taken from me. And I remember diving to the floor screaming to God, saying, why? What did I do? What did I do? Please, I don't understand. And for someone that had grown up at a non-denominational school, parents that didn't believe in God, how do you explain that? You know, that it was just, it was...
So what was it? What do you believe that it was taken from you?
I don't believe it was something that was taken from me. I believe that, and it's interesting, I've spoken to another friend that had a similar experience when she was about 3 or 4 years old. A trauma didn't happen, but it was like, she could remember things from past lives when she was about 3 or 4, and she'd talk about like obelisks and like crazy things that a 3 or 4 year old shouldn't know. But she was playing in her front yard, and she said she could feel this like veil drop, and it was like she was disconnected from that, and she couldn't remember any of her past lives anymore. And so what I believe is, because we're living in a time, in Vedic knowledge, it's called a Kali Yuga. So this is the darkest time we could be in existence. There's 4 ages. There's the Satya Yuga, which is like the Yuga, that Yuga means age, Yuga of truth. So we can speak to each other telepathically. We're totally connected to God. We know that we're divine beings. We see ourselves as human, but we know that we're divine all at the same time. You know, we can manifest things. We could say, oh, I need this, boom, it's there. You know, it's just that instantaneous power, so divinely connected to our consciousness that is everything. We can just pull that through. Then we go into the Dwapara Yuga, which is like the silver age. So we lose, I believe it's, I think 25%. So we drop down into a 75 percentile consciousness. Then we have the Treta Yuga, which is like the bronze age, which then we drop another 25%. So we're at like 50% of knowing that we're divine. And I mean like the population as well. So like 50% of people will remember, 50% of people don't. And then now we're in the Kali Yuga, which is like the lead.
Is this a cyclical process?
It is a cyclical process. So we'll tip back into the next age, but we're going to be in this for quite some time.
Okay, and that to me is quite apparent, very obvious. If you look around the world, you get that feeling that things are not really very healthy. The planet itself is sort of fighting back a little bit here. Yeah. But Katie, I want to get back to your story. Yeah. So this event, this tragedy, and I could feel the pain from you when you were telling me. You believe that was a trigger for the onset of...
Yeah, well, I'd say with that experience of like the trauma and everything, I mean, one, it was like this event that happened that proved that voice in my head that had been there all along telling me I was a piece of shit, I was useless, I was an idiot, I was a fuck up. It proved it right. And, you know, being someone so desperate for everyone's love and approval to have now done this, not that I did it, it was an accident, but at that time I believed it was all my fault. You know, people would say to me, it was an accident. I'm like, yeah, but I drove. You know, I was at the wheel.
Yeah.
So it is my fault, you know. I do now, years and years and years of working on this, I do see that it was a pure accident, and I don't want to make any light of the loss of the two boys, but I do believe it was a divine plan. I don't believe there's any mistakes in this world. I believe it is all for our learning and for our growth and for our evolution as a consciousness, not just me, everybody.
I mean, that has ramifications for free will. You know, that's one of those questions, isn't it? And I've thought long and hard about this.
Yeah.
Is everything we do...
It's funny, that was coming into my consciousness this morning when I was meditating about free will and God's will.
There
and all
you go.
It's happened many times, but it's funny that it popped back in today.
Okay, but so naturally you dealt with a lot of trauma following this, as anyone would. Yeah. And you weren't drinking or using drugs up until that point, so afterwards?
Yeah, so I met a girl who introduced me to pot, and oh my God, it was the solution to everything. I remember when I took that first hit of a joint. Oh no, I think I started with water bongs. Anyway,
okay,
very Australian.
Straight to the bong.
Straight to the bong. Yeah. You know, I
used to love a good bong myself.
Oh, who didn't? But I felt that instantaneous relief. I felt, I just felt like everything washed away. I had nothing to worry about. I could stop thinking. I could breathe. It just made everything stop for a while. Yeah, so I was in year 12 at the time, and I would just, and my mum, God bless her, she made me go back to school. Yeah. I think a lot of parents would have maybe like just let their kid, I don't know, but she was like, just get your degree, just get your HSC. Yeah. And I hated her at the time for it. I was like, don't you see I'm like dying here? But I'm glad she did, you know, but I would go and sign in at school, and this girl would then come pick me up. We'd go and smoke weed all day, and then I'd come back to get picked up from school, or I'd go home and pretending like I've been at school all day. And that was really the beginning. And then, you know, I hate when people say like weed's the gateway drug, but I think if you're gonna go down that road, anything can be the gateway. Sure. You know? Yeah. But yeah, that started my very quick spiral. Okay. Very quick. Like I you know, started dabbling in speed and ecstasy and party drugs. You know, we'd go to the club and take half a B, and it was awesome. Yeah. And, but then I think once I left school, I got involved with like hard party people. That like smashed it all weekend. They were older than me. They were like 15 years older than me. And, you know, I very quickly saw that I wanted to spend all weekend, like I'm talking Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday. That was my weekend. As high as I possibly could.
Sure.
And so that got me doing work that I never would have imagined I would have done. You know, I was doing topless waitressing.
Okay.
I was, working in like bikies clubhouses.
Yep.
I became a dealer.
Mm-hmm.
I went to Darwin and stripped for a month.
Okay.
Because that was the stuff that paid big money for very little work.
Yep.
I mean, little work, but huge chunks of my soul.
Sure.
Huge. I had no idea.
But did you know at this stage that did you have a feeling that you might be addicted? Because
no idea.
Just 1 second, because what you were describing even before that event, when you're at school, you described what seems to be like a universal characteristic of people who suffer from the disease of addiction, and that's that restless, irritable discontent, the feeling I'm not good enough.
But I want to say that, you know, there are people that don't go down the road of addiction that have the same head.
Totally.
You know, and that's why they talk about in recovery that it's a threefold disease. You know, that it's mental, spiritual, and physical. You know.
So I suppose what I was trying to say to you was, you indicated symptoms of that before the car accident, and obviously then the trauma associated with the car accident afterwards definitely had something to do with, as you describe it, a very quick spiral into addiction. And so my question is, when you were doing these things, these unsavoury things to satisfy your addiction, or to get the money obviously to buy drugs, were you aware that you were addicted? I mean, was there any sort of awareness around it?
Not at all. Not at all. Because I quickly found the people that used the way I did. You know, like I very quickly found those people that smoked weed every day, that drank every night, and that partied Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday.
Yeah.
Maybe even Tuesday, maybe even Wednesday, you know, like, so it was just like, oh, this is just what people do.
Yeah.
Honest to God, that's just, I was in the complete delusion that this was totally normal. And also, you got to remember, I was suffering a severe trauma, so I hated myself. Like, I wanted to die on a daily basis. I woke up wanting to die. I would be disappointed that I'd woken up, and I would go to sleep hoping to die. And that was my existence for about 13 years.
Okay.
I'm not saying every day, but I'd say 75% of that time was I had a death wish. So I put myself in those places because I did not care about myself anymore. I didn't care. At
what stage did you realise that you needed help?
There was a couple of times. I remember being 21, and I was at my godfather's house in Double Bay. I would sometimes come to his house, and like, I don't know how I used to get in. It was like he's a very wealthy man with like gated mansions and things. I don't know how I used to get in, but I did. And he'd sometimes find me on his couch because I didn't want to go home. And because if I went home, then I'd get in trouble, you know, and I'd get the rousing that I didn't want to get. And I remember I think my parents were away, and I just broke down on his couch with him sitting next to me, and I just said, I can't go on anymore. I can't do this anymore.
Yeah.
I'm a mess, you know. And so he booked me in. He did the best he could. He with the knowledge he had. So he booked me into a wellness retreat,
Okay.
which was lovely. It was a great little break.
Sure.
And I remember the night before I was set to leave, I went out with friends and I, took a lot of things before getting on the plane, just to get on the plane.
So where was this? Overseas?
No. It was just up in the Byron hinterland. Oh, not Byron. It was Camp Eden. Beautiful retreat.
Okay.
Absolutely gorgeous. I highly recommend it to anybody.
Where is Camp Eden?
It's... I think I flew into Coolangatta.
Okay,
I don't know. I was pretty toasted.
Yeah, it's up that way.
Yeah, it's beautiful, but it's beautiful. I do remember being there.
Yeah.
And I flew in and I went straight to my room, and they, wanted me to come down for like a group. It wasn't a retreat center, not like a rehab or anything.
No.
It was literally just like people were going there to get off cigarettes and lose weight.
Sure.
And I was there like rocking from coming down from drugs.
Okay.
It wasn't nice, but anyway, of course there's two not young, but they were like in their 40s, two guys that were just taking a break from partying.
Okay.
And of course I befriended them, and so as soon as I left, I went to their house and got on it.
Right,
I wasn't ready to stop.
Well, you were 21, it's pretty
21.
young.
So there was that, and then I had another breakdown maybe a year later, and I actually went into a rehab then. My parents booked me into a rehab. But, I remember one of my party friends came to see me, and we were talking about getting on it when I left,
Yeah.
That was a pretty severe treatment. Like they had me in intensive care. They took like my shoelaces and any cords or anything so that I wouldn't try and kill myself. And so there was that.
How long was that program for?
To be honest, you know what? It was actually, I don't remember much of it because the only reason I remembered even being there was when I went to go and speak there to talk about my story.
All right.
And I was there, and it was halfway through my speech that I realised I'd been there.
Oh, God. Okay.
Like, that's how just
really
messed up I was.
Yeah.
No, it was the drugs and the alcohol, but it was the PTSD too.
Sure,
I was a walking shell. And I truly believe as well, like, when we experience trauma, a part of our spirit leaves us, but it's a safety mechanism. It's so that we can just kind of get by without too much on board. And it's not until we're ready to actually deal with the trauma that more energy will come in and we can actually use that energy to heal.
All right.
And then what was the next one? At 27, I had a full-blown mental breakdown. So my 27th birthday, I had my first real sort of spiritual experience since I was a child. Like after I'd see angels and all that. Not see them, I just knew they were there. But I hadn't had an experience like that for quite some time. And then on my 27th birthday, my friend was throwing a big birthday party for me. The birthday party I'd always wanted someone to throw for me, right? Like, everybody's there and it's thrown for me. There was a DJ, there was drugs, there was alcohol, it was on.
Yep.
It was on a rooftop in Bondi. I felt so uncomfortable.
Okay.
I felt so uncomfortable. And I was like, what is going on? Like, this is everything you could have ever wanted.
Yeah.
Like, what's wrong, All I could think about, and this is very typical of people like you and I, all I could think about was the people that weren't there.
Okay.
The people that hadn't shown up,
All right.
that the music wasn't loud enough, that the speakers weren't good enough. Like, I was just picking out all the problems. And that was my first experience of that wasn't my first experience of the restless, irritable discontent, but it was the first time I noticed it.
Yeah.
I was like, whoa, like, what's going on here?
Yep.
And so I remember I took myself to the back. So they were out on the front balcony, big, huge rooftop.
Yep.
And I took myself out the back where there was no one to have a good, talking to myself, come on, get in the game. It's a party to be had, drugs to be taken. And I remember I just sort of, talking to myself, and I was having a cigarette, and I felt a tap on my shoulder, and I turned around, no one was there. And then this voice just said, enough now. And I knew. And I knew it was like not necessarily God, but it was a being, and it was wanting the best for me, and it wanted me to stop drinking and taking drugs. Yeah. And so internally I was like, yep, okay, I hear you, I get it, after tonight.
Yeah.
And so, you know, I proceeded to have a good night, party, blah, 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 and then I made this deal with myself that I would do 30 days. I'd do a detox.
Okay.
I'd heard of these detoxes before, you know, people doing these. I had girlfriends that would do these, like, I'm not drinking coffee, I'm not smoking, I'm not eating meat for 30 days or like 3 months or something. I'm like, why the fuck would you do that? Like, that sounds horrible, you know? But I thought, I'm going to do one of those things that those people do. And so I started, and 3 days later I had an empty bottle of wine in front of me, and I didn't know how it got there.
Yeah.
And I thought, fuck, I've gone and done it. I'm one of those people. Yep. I've crossed over that thin red line they talk about.
No defense against the first drink.
No, but I didn't know any of that sort of like terminology or anything. I knew.
Yes.
I knew I was one of those people that had an issue.
That's when it hit home
That's when it hit home.
Yeah.
And so the next morning I said to my mum, oh, can we go for a walk? And my mum thought, what's going on here? You know, because I never was home, you know, and if I was home, I wasn't a very nice person. So I remember her saying to me, I thought you were going to tell me you were pregnant. Anyway, so we went for this walk, and I said, oh, Mum, I've got something to tell you. And she said, okay. What? You know, and I've been arrested a number of times in this period. She's like, oh God, what could it be now? And I said, I think I've got a problem with drinking. I don't think I said drugs, but I said drinking. Yep. And she said, yeah, welcome to the table.
All right.
You know? And I said, you know, I think I really need to see someone. I think I need to see a therapist. I need to deal with what happened to me. I never dealt with it. I was going to therapists and stuff after the accident, but I was so annoyed at these therapists. I just could feel that none of them knew what the fuck I was going through. And they were just speaking to me from a textbook, and I didn't want a fucking bar of it. I didn't want a bar of it. Yeah. And so, a little side note that I feel like I need to add in, I remember saying, maybe a year after the accident, I said, I vow, I made a prayer, even though I didn't feel connected to God anymore. I said, I vow to be that person that no one has been able to be for me. I vow to be that person that understands.
Cool. Yeah.
Sits there and says, I know, it's going to be okay. Little did I know that prayer would come and bite me on the ass. I mean that very much jokingly, because I love my life. But I forgot where I was up to now.
So you were talking to your mum.
Oh yeah, so you know, so I started seeing a therapist.
Yeah.
She definitely suggested going to a 12-step group.
Okay. Yep. How did your mum know about that? Was she?
She didn't. She just sent me to a therapist.
Oh, the therapist suggested.
The therapist suggested that I go to a 12-step group. Yeah. But I think I went to a couple, but I wasn't ready, you know, and all I could see was these losers that couldn't handle their drink. Yeah. You know, that's how I saw it anyway. And then, so I was trying to not drink, but I just, you know, I'd get a couple of days up, and then, I don't know, Melbourne Cup would happen. Or something, you know, they just, and I would always find, if I wasn't drinking, and then I'd have a drink, and then it'd be 5 a.m. the next morning and I'd be on drugs, and I was just like, how do I get here? What's happening? I don't understand. And then I remember one night getting on it, and I had to be at the therapist the next day, and I hadn't slept because I'd been on coke, and I just felt horrible, and I was going crazy. Yeah. And I went to my therapist, and I had a full-blown mental breakdown.
It's not a good feeling, is it?
No. Especially mental breakdowns, like your whole like world collapses.
Yeah.
Like I remember saying to her, if you asked me to go and buy a bus ticket right now, I wouldn't know how to do it. She said, that's okay. you having a mental breakdown? And I was like, I don't even know what that means.
Yeah.
And they got me into a rehab straight away.
Okay.
Yeah, because it was bad. I'd lost it completely. I had no idea. I was even starting to think, like, what if I forget how to breathe?
Yeah.
Everything came crashing down.
That's probably like the insanity that you hear. So, you know.
Yeah.
And I can relate because I've been there. But so tell me more. When you get to this is like your second rehab. Your first one was a wellness retreat, so we won't call that a rehab.
Yeah,
But, you know, you've obviously been, how old are you at this stage?
27.
Okay, so how did you go after the stint in rehab?
So I went into that rehab believing that if I just dealt with what happened to me, I'd be okay.
Yeah.
Because I still didn't have any notion that I actually had an issue with drugs and alcohol.
Okay. This fly's annoying me.
Yeah,
Sorry.
I know, I can see that. I truly believe that I was the way I was because of what happened.
Yeah.
So I thought if I go in and I get sorted and get all sewn up, I'll be all right. So I did, and I didn't really divulge how much I was drinking or taking drugs because I was like, it's not the problem, guys. The problem is this thing that happened when I was 17. So, you know, I did a lot of work on that, but, you know, I was literally just starting to open up the stitching by going into that rehab because that was the first time I actually really started to deal with that.
Yeah.
And that is a big bomb to deal with.
Yeah.
And that's taken me, and it's still, you know, like, what? Since I started on that journey of healing, it's 17 years.
Yeah.
Sorry. It's, what am I now? 3? Yeah.
It's about 17.
17 years. Yeah.
Can I ask you, how do you deal with it? And so you said that you opened up the stitching. Do you, I mean, how have you been able to deal with it?
I mean, look, at that rehab, I remember I had to like write a fairy tale of what happened, which was a good way for me to sort of be a bit separate from it, right? And I was able, because I don't think I was having a lot of nightmares, of course, like night terrors of the event, but how do you deal with trauma? There's many, many different ways, and I believe that when you're ready, like when I was ready, teachers, therapists, books started to come into my consciousness, but I actually had to be in that place where I was like, I'm ready to deal with this.
Yeah.
You know, and I think Maston Kipp is he's a trauma specialist. I love following his Instagram and his writings and his speeches. But, you know, he's one of many. And I do believe there's many different ways. But so, for example, the Vedic meditation that you and I both do, you know, that's sitting twice a day for 20 minutes, allowing your body to de-stress, unstress, by just sitting and breathing and chanting a mantra. I have also done training as a therapist, and through that training I've had to deal with my own stuff, and we're a multi-layered, multifaceted being. We're more than just this physical being. You know, we're a soul, we're a spirit, we have an energy body with chakras and meridians and an auric field. We have our family line to deal with. There's a lot to us, but it depends on where you're at and what you believe in and what floats your boat that will guide your...
That bloody flies back, sorry. Keep going, because I'm interested in this.
That will direct your path of healing, you know, and definitely getting into recovery was part of that as well. But yeah, I mean, I didn't stay sober from that point. I tried, but I just didn't believe that I was one of those. And so I went back out for a number of years, and the reason I speed up is because then it actually gets to the part where I had my awakening. You know, a lot of people get into recovery from having a rock bottom, like getting arrested. I mean, I got arrested 5 times. That didn't do anything for me. scared the shit out of me, but I believe this stuff happens when it's meant to happen, you know. And I was at Burning Man. I was just about to turn 30. It was my second time to Burning Man. And I was with two people, and I don't know if I can talk about what actually happened because it's quite out there.
All right.
Like in a metaphysical context.
Yeah, I want to hear it.
Okay. Yeah, I don't know if I can go. I'll talk about it as much as I can that I feel comfortable with.
All right.
Yeah. Because it's quite sacred what
Okay,
happened,
sure.
and it's not. I know that this is going to go out publicly, and it's really quite out there.
Okay.
So basically, this couple who are beautiful light workers. One is actually a light worker. He does like projection mapping of like beautiful light installations on things like the Man at Burning Man, and you know, like Vivid. You know, they have like those projections of like the building falling down on Customs House and things like that.
Yep.
That's the kind of work he does.
Okay.
So not only is he a light worker, but he does it through lights. It's amazing.
Yeah.
And his wife is, she does beautiful divine feminine work, really helping women to connect to the truth of their essence.
Yeah.
And men, if they assigned to feeling more like a woman, doesn't matter about gender, it's the feminine.
Mm-hmm.
And anyway, I didn't really know these people very well, but we were standing sort of on the outskirts of our camp as the sun was setting, and our camp was about to have a party.
Okay.
And the wife said to her husband, in regards to me, she said, she's ready. And he said, okay. And he grabbed her hand and she grabbed my hand. And then they started leading me like a follow the leader. What I understand now is that they were getting me into like a meditative state and to just trust them. And I was at this point in my life where I was so desperate. I was so desperate for an answer. I was so desperate for a solution. I was so desperate to be taken out of my life.
Yeah.
You know, at that point, not, you know, with the long string of shit that had happened, another explosion of things had happened with like a best friend and a guy that I was seeing, and then them getting together, and I was just done. I was so broken open and bleeding heart and tired and sad and lost and alone and in pain. I was ready for anything.
Yep.
And I believe that's what she saw. And so through this meditative state, they then got me into a state of consciousness that then helped me to experience matter as energy.
Yep.
So matter, I won't say what matter it was, but some matter separated into energy for me to then pass through as a physical being. That's as far as I'm going to go with that. But I had this experience where I saw more than what this third dimension has available to us. And I had no idea what I'd experienced, but it was extremely powerful. And I came out the other side total mind blown. I thought I'd actually lost my mind.
Yep. Can I ask you a question? And by no way am I trying to take any value out of what you're saying, but were there any drugs involved?
This is what everybody asked. Yeah, there were drugs involved.
Yeah.
But it wasn't...
There were psychedelics, obviously, because you're at Burning Man.
No, I wasn't on psychedelics at the time.
Oh, okay.
No.
I've never been. I just assumed that it would be, you know, full of mushrooms and LSD.
But there's also sober parties. There's people there are people there with families.
Yeah.
It's not, you know, there are people that are getting high like I was.
Yeah.
But at that time, I'd only had a little bit of something.
Okay.
That wasn't a psychedelic.
All right.
And so it wasn't to do with what I was on.
Sure, absolutely, yeah.
Yeah,
So was this moment, because now I want to take the conversation towards your spirituality.
Yeah, well, this is the catalyst.
Yeah.
So the party then goes on. actually, sorry, when I had that experience of matter not being matter and it actually being energy, because look, you got to understand, I'd had experiences like that through drugs and stuff before, but I never knew what I was experiencing. And you know, if you're any kind of spiritual aspirant like I am, you will have listened to Ram Dass.
Yeah, totally.
Who was, you know, his start on his journey to becoming Ram Dass was through LSD.
Yes, it was.
You know,
yeah.
and so, yeah, I think we do need to be careful in the way we talk about that stuff, because drugs are definitely an opening for us to experience higher levels of consciousness, for us to experience what is actually available that we don't see in the third dimension.
Well, I was going to say to you before that, you know, and I've got to be very careful with what I say, obviously, because, but, you know, with the trauma, and because when I first went to my rehab, I was in rehab with a bloke, a really nice guy, an Australian who'd served in the military. He'd done a couple of tours in Afghanistan, and he was in the compound of the Australian Army in Afghanistan when a suicide bomber came into and blew up the place, and he had to pick up body parts, collect the body parts, and so he was working with psilocybin as a way of dealing with the trauma.
Yeah, that's becoming more popular, which is fantastic, and ketamine as well.
Right.
Ketamine was actually my drug of choice, and I understand why now. They use it for in anesthesia, like to put people under. Because it really does take people to a happy place.
Sure.
Some people don't have great experiences, but I digress. I believe that, you know, there are no mistakes in this world, and that there are, you know, these drugs that, like, I mean, psilocybin is a natural compound that comes from mushrooms, and I don't know, I'm not a chemist, I don't know enough about it, but, you know, I don't believe that there are, these things are not mistakes, you know, that the divine hasn't created these things for us to, I mean, we're abusing them, but they are for our benefit. Unfortunately, for someone like me that's pushed over the thin red line, that stuff's not about. Not unfortunately, I've had my experience. I've done my thing. I don't need that stuff today, because I have such an amazing connection with the divine that I don't need that stuff to bring me to that.
Sure.
You know, so just back on what happened. Later that night, that couple. Our whole camp went off to see something. And I was not in a good way. I thought I'd gone mad. My head was spinning. Since that experience, then proceeded to take a lot of stuff that night. And because I was just trying to understand what had happened to me. And then I had this like bubble in my chest, which has been a theme that has, well, not a theme, but an experience that still comes up today. I get that bubble again in my chest, and sometimes I have to like belch when I'm having like energetic processes. So it's really interesting. But this bubble was in my chest was stopping me from going out. I felt really unwell. I wanted to be sick, but I couldn't be sick. And anyway, so I found a spot in our camp, and everyone's gone. Like everybody's gone, because we wanted to go and see our friends that were performing on a certain art car. So everyone's gone except for the couple. Of course. And I rolled into the wife's arms, and I just looked up at her, and I said to her, what I experienced, like, did that happen? And she said, yes, darling. And I just burst into tears. My heart fully opened. Because this truth came washing over me that there's so much more to my beingness that I always knew as a child, but I'd been denying ever since the accident. You know, I was starting to even say in that period that, you know, God doesn't exist, God's not real. But every time I said that, I'd get this real like flip-flop in my stomach, and I felt sick. And so that experience that I'd had those few hours earlier was an experience of truth. And I knew that. And I just started wailing. She passed me off to her husband, and he literally held me like a baby as I was reborn. I know that sounds really like, it sounds like whatever it sounds like, but that's what was happening to me. I felt everything being stripped from me. As I cried, I felt my skin, my just all my experiences, my lives, it felt like everything was getting pulled from me. And I was being just stripped bare, completely stripped bare to my core essence. And then he proceeded to channel a message to me. One of those things was, you need to stop drinking and taking drugs.
Yeah.
You have to not get, I don't believe he used the word sober, but like, you need to be clean. You need to start meditating every day. You've got a really big job on this planet to do, which I think every single human being has a really big job on this planet to do. It wasn't just, at that time I took it as like, oh, I'm going to be the rescuer and savior of the world. Every single person on this planet has a big job to do to surpass the ego and step into the truth of the divine. It's a huge process.
Yeah, it is.
I didn't understand that that's what it was, though, at the time. He said, you need to go on a pilgrimage. You need to start learning. You need to find your teachers. And I feel like that was like the main message. And I just was crying and crying and crying and crying and crying. And that was the beginning.
Of your
Even though we're like halfway through the talk, but that was the beginning. The beginning of what I am now and where I am now. Yeah.
So that was the begining of your spiritual journey.
Of my journey. So I didn't get sober straight away, but so I was meant to be moving to Singapore when I got out of Burning Man. I had like a managerial role of a sushi bar or something. I can't even really remember, but I was in talks, like it was happening, like we were just going back and forth with the contract. I'd sent my contract, they'd sent the contract to me as I was going into Burning Man. I wrote back my, like just my changes to it and, you know, the things that they'd said on the call that we would do. And I sent that as I was going into Burning Man. When I came out of Burning Man, they hadn't agreed to anything, and I just knew that I wasn't meant to go. And I said, thanks, no thanks, peace, I'm out. So we went to our like wash down, they call it like a wash down after Burning Man, so you go somewhere to just sort of decompress. Yeah. Because it's pretty full on. Burning Man's an amazing, you know, week, and I highly recommend it to anyone. Yeah. It really does help you to, it gives you exactly what you need. Yeah. And I had two mates that were meeting us there, and they were going to go on a little pilgrimage to find trimming work and just go adventuring. And I just knew I was meant to go with them. I won't tell the full story because it's a bit of a long one and we've been talking a lot already, but it was the beginning of me starting to trust God again. Yeah. So just a few different things that happened. Like, I remember saying to my parents, I'm not taking the job in Singapore and I'm not coming back to Sydney. I'm staying in America. I've changed my flight. I hadn't changed my flight yet, but I've got work. I lied, but...
So when you say trimming...
working on marijuana plantations.
Okay, that sounds... okay, like, okay.
Look, it was cash work. I loved at the
weed
time
so much.
And, you know, I was with these two guys that I totally trusted. And, yeah, it was... Anyway, I remember this is just one of the... Like, I was starting to see signs, right? Like, I was starting to get connected to the signs from the universe, which I'd never really done before. I went to change my ticket. And I had like no money, right? But I had just like the exact amount of points, like frequent flyer points, that it would have cost me to change my flight. Yeah. It was 11,000 points. And that's exactly what I had. I thought, okay, I'll take that, change the flight. The night before we were set to leave, me and these two guys, I'm freaking out. I'm like, what the fuck am I doing? This is insane. I should not be doing this, but something was telling me I had to go and I had to trust these messages and this energy. There was this energy kind of pushing me to go and just trust yourself, trust that you can do stuff. And we were sitting around the dinner table, and the husband, the man that helped me have that experience, he could see me wigging out and freaking out, and he said, Katie, have a look at your Coke can. Remember, like the Coke cans have all like the different names and all that stuff on them?
Yeah.
They just started doing this.
Yeah.
And I turned it around and it said adventurer on it.
Nice.
The next day we went into a coffee shop. There was a sign that said, you're exactly where you're meant to be. Like just all this stuff started happening, and that's how I started on this journey. I mean, even that story, that short time there, that was a huge evolutionary time for me in terms of my relationship with the divine. Just I actually started having visions. I was able to see things that were happening in the future, and then they happened. So I started really waking up. But I got back to LA after we got work and all that stuff, and crazy time, but also an extremely expansive and deeply connecting time for me and my higher power. And I came back to LA, and I knew I needed to go and see a woman that I'd met when I first came into recovery at 27. Mm-hmm. She was a spiritual healer and a teacher, and she was sober. So I reached out to her and I said, I said to her in this message, I'm like, this thing has happened, this experience and this, that, and I know I'm meant to be doing what you're doing. And, again, another like just beautiful, the divine just totally holding me through this whole thing. I really didn't have much money, even though I'd just been working on a marijuana farm, we don't need to get into it, but, her student was leaving from LA to come down to San Diego the next day. And she said, he's going to bring you. Just things like that. And I got to her and I told her the whole story, because I knew she'd be able to understand, because she'd told me about experiences of like a car driving through her car, like not crashing, but like the energy moving so that they didn't actually crash.
Yep.
And so I knew that she wouldn't think I was crazy or I'd just been high, that it was a very real experience. And bless her, she's so beautiful and amazing. She sat there very patiently and she believed everything, and because it was real, but she knew the underlying issue was that I needed to get sober. And so she heard me out, smiled, very loving, yes. And at the end of the conversation, she said, so, every time you smoke weed or do drugs, you rip your aura? And I was like, what? What do you mean? And she said, yeah, and it allows entities to come in to your system. Yep. And I was horrified, because I thought I was now meant to become like the next Jesus. I honestly believed for a minute there that I was Jesus reincarnated. Okay. That's what happens when you have full-on spiritual experiences but then continue to do drugs. Sure. Because the ego holds on to it. Yep. And that's actually what got me into recovery. All right. Because I didn't want to damage my energy body anymore.
Just for the audience, we had to move inside. You can probably still hear the saw, but I apologise, because we're surrounded by construction sites. It's just the modern world. We can't escape it. It's been like that here for the last 3 years non-stop. So I'm sorry if the recording you could hear construction noises, but we've moved inside. So we're going to continue the conversation. Katie, you were talking about, let's just recap here. You had your spiritual awakening in Burning Man, then you went to see somebody who you'd met in recovery in San Diego. Where that's about where we're up to, I think. Yeah. So, look, I just knew that she was who I needed to go and see. And as I said before, she told me about how, like, when I take drugs, it rips my aura, and I was horrified. She was very clever to be able to because she could tell I was still, like, very much on the edge of, I wasn't quite, like, ready to get recovery, to get sober. That I now was all of a sudden attached to this, like, I'm spiritual, and not that I'm spiritual, but like that I had this job to do. My ego had really hooked into that channeling from my friend. I wasn't in any kind of state of desperation, which I truly believe you need
to make big changes in your life. I don't mean it's just to do with getting sober. I think, well, no, not everyone, but I think majority of us or anyone that's like me that's been so run by their ego, I need to be kind of really pushed up against a wall to change.
Yep.
Unfortunately. And anyway, so she said, look, let's go to a meeting tomorrow. Let's go to a 12-step meeting tomorrow. So, and that's what I did. And I remember I went in and I just cried. I just cried through the whole meeting because there was just this it was like a sense of relief that I could maybe get off this crazy train that I'd been on for 13 years. And there was also a sense of sadness and fear that like, oh my God, this actually might be for real this time. And I think I had like 5 days left on my visa in the States. So I spent it with her and she was doing healings on me. She was getting rid of energies and entities that I'd picked up along the way, which was really intense. Not through her modality, but just that there was just so much going on in me. And that really started my journey. I was inducted into the mystery school that she was a part of. So a mystery school is called a mystery school because it talks about the mysteries of healing and the divine and consciousness. And the reason it is a mystery is because it is a mystery, this thing that we call God and the divine. Although they've just started
we
here
can't
now.
escape. That's okay.
I love
That's
it.
all right.
I love it. It's like, it's interesting that, because in the Kali Yuga, there's so many distractions from the divine, and we're trying to have a really divine conversation, and it just isn't lost on me that there's these energies coming from outside trying to distract us.
Now you've just opened a big can of worms.
Okay.
Because the distractions from the divine, we've got noises outside, but the biggest distraction is, as far as I know, is the distraction in here. So the voice in the head.
Yeah.
Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I guess, but that is, the mind is partly a reflection, it is the creation and a reflection of our environment. So say I was born a Buddhist monk and I was brought up with meditation and a vegetarian diet.
But no one's born a Buddhist monk, are they? I mean,
sorry?
You can't be born a monk.
I'm just saying, say you were born into that kind of life, like a spiritual family of.
Well, the Buddha himself was born into that.
He was a prince.
Family. Right.
Yeah, he was a prince.
Sure.
But again, there's mixed stories about the Buddha, but yeah, he was a prince, and he looked over the wall and wondered what was out there, and just knew that there was more to existence than what he was living in, and went to go and find it. But I'd say with the mind, yes, it is totally a massive distraction. And, we as humans have created all these other things to then, or we're almost be like married with that distraction, thinking that it's distracting us from our distraction in our mind, like television, gaming, mobile phones, pornography, drugs, alcohol, all that stuff. It's like, I believe people use that stuff to get away from the uncomfortability that we can develop in our minds. But the mind I have today is so different to what it was 4 years ago, through meditation, through healing, through yoga, through, self-inquiry, through changing the kind of language that I use towards myself, prayer, aligning myself with higher states of consciousness, with cleaner, healthier, more peace-laden ways of being. Yeah.
This is important because this is something I wanted to discuss with you, the gifts of recovery. In other words, so compared to the really traumatic, insane existence you described earlier, what's your life like now?
My life
Seems
is
quite
amazing now.
serene.
Yeah, my life is really amazing now. Like a typical day for me is, getting up mostly with the sun, maybe just after the sun. I do breath work, pranayama it's called, but it's just easy to say breath work.
Can you explain that to me? Is that through the nose?
Yeah, so there's different types of pranayama. It's I remember talking about it when I did my yoga teacher training, and it's just escaped my mind what it actually means. But prana is the life force, and yama, it's something to do with control, but it's not quite the right word. There's another word for it, so I do apologize to my teacher. But so we're working with the life force through, there's alternate nostril breathing, so blocking one side, breathing up, holding it in the third eye, out the other side, holding out, in.
How long do you hold out for?
3 seconds.
Okay.
So breathe in for about 7 seconds, hold for 3 seconds, out for 7 seconds, hold for 3 seconds, up the same nostril.
And how long do you repeat that for, that process?
You should do about 7 rounds. So up one side, out the other side, up the right side, down the left side. That's 1 round. Do 7 rounds of that. Then I do what's called turtle breathing. So it's breathing in and lifting the chin up. I really concentrate on my throat chakra through that. So I'm really cleaning out through this area. This is where we hold like our ideas of ourselves, our constructs of how life should be. Also being able to speak our truth, details, timing. So I really should have worked on that this morning considering I was so late. Breathing in through the opening of the throat chakra, with the front of the throat chakra, and then exhaling as I bring my head down and out the back of the throat. So I'll do 12 and 2 rounds of 12.
Okay.
And then I would do breath of fire, which is the short, sharp breathing. And then I would do deer breathing, where I breathe in from the earth and hold and squeeze my perineum. So like the muscle, if you need to hold to not go to the toilet, like hold your urine in. So squeezing that, pulse that for 8 to 10 times, releasing. I do that 3 times, so 3 sets of 7 to 10 pulses, holding my energy in the perineum there. And then for the last 4 rounds, I'll bring the energy up into my third eye, and then I meditate for 20 minutes. And then I do a round of siddhis. So siddha means like the perfected human, and there's these mantras that you can do to help you to attain the qualities of the perfect human.
How long does all of that take you?
That takes me about half an hour, and then I'll do some mantra if I have time as well, out loud. So like I'll do japa with my malas. So I'll do 1 round of japa. Yeah, and then so that's like morning for me, and then I have some herbs that I'm taking at the moment, some Ayurvedic herbs. I'm on like an Ayurvedic program at the moment. I try to move my body in some way, shape or form. I water my garden, which is something that I really love and have just started doing. I've started to garden out the back of my room. I have a beautiful animal that I love. He's my world. I live with my folks at the moment.
What's the animal?
A little cat.
Okay.
Yeah. I live with my folks at the moment, so I try and, make them a cup of tea or do something for them. And then my day can be filled with either clients. So I'm a therapist now. I work with energy and counseling skills, and I either teach them some mantra or will move some of that lower level energy that they're holding on to, that's keeping them in a vibration, that's keeping them stuck in, say, not making as much money as they would like, or bringing in a relationship, or achieving whatever it is that they're looking to achieve, X, Y, Z, going to go study, bringing in more clients, whatever it is. So I help them release that energy, and I put in through channeling energy and through their will and their own guidance and direction, I'll project the positive energy and help them be blessed and energized with what it is that they actually want. But, it's like things with The Secret.
Yep.
It's all very good to do, what is it? trying to manifest something like positive quotes and things like that. That's all well and good, but if you're still sitting with stuff that you actually truly believe about yourself, it's like putting sugar on shit. You know, it won't work. You got to get rid of the shit first, and then you can get the sugar.
Yeah,
if that makes sense. I am at university. I am studying to become a teacher.
Okay.
I had a vision during my drinking and drugging days. One night I went home and I had a very clear vision. My third eye opened and I saw this school and this was before I ever touched on any spirituality, prayer, meditation, yoga, anything. I mean, I did a bit of yoga, but I saw this school and it looks like it's in like the Byron hinterland somewhere. But I could see it clear as day. These kids were doing meditation and mantra and movement every morning. And it was an academic school, but with the basis of spirituality and emotional intelligence and communication skills and internal inquiry and, talking about how they're feeling. And
so that's an ambition of yours then, is it?
Yeah, that's what I'm now trying to make happen. So I'm at university doing that, and I've been studying for the past 4 years in this mystery school, as well as trips to India, doing study over there, getting myself as clear a channel as I possibly can be for the divine's purpose for me in this incarnation.
And I want to hear about India. You're going to India on Saturday.
Yeah.
Today is Thursday, so two days.
Yeah.
You want to take me with you?
Sure.
I'd love to go to India.
Yeah.
But of course, maybe next time. Tell me about India. What's you're going to see your guru?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Sri Shakti Amanarani. This being is what is called an avatar. They come into human form, like the divine comes in human form to balance out the adharma. So you may have heard of like dharmic path through Buddhism. Like we're to live our dharma, and it's the righteous path. But when the world flips into more adharma than dharma, the divine will come and help to rebalance the world. And that is my guru, Amma.
Okay.
Yeah.
Amma? Is that the hug?
No.
Who's that?
So Amma, it is said that she is Kali in human form.
Yep.
So Kali is the goddess that she can be depicted as quite scary. She has a garland of skulls around her neck, and like she has the tongue out and her eyes are very fierce, but she loves so fiercely. That's actually what she's doing. She's loving us so much that she'll take on our egos for us. And so Amma, that Amma is supposedly she is an incarnation of Kali. So my guru is in a male's body, but is the Divine Mother, which might sound kind of weird, but what I think is fantastic is that, this being has come. I love that the flies followed us in. All the distractions. So Amma has come in a male's body. Well, one, in India, it's still a very patriarchal society. So to get anything done, you kind of need to be a man. But she is the Divine Mother. She's Narayani, which is the triple-headed goddess Durga, Lakshmi, and Saraswati. I don't know if any of that means anything to you, but that's who my guru is. She's the human. She's come in human form, but she is the Divine Mother and avatar. So an avatar means like people like you and I. We have souls and we reincarnate and we come back and back and back. Not Amma. She's just pure divinity in a human form.
All right. So you've been 7 times to India?
Yeah.
That's so awesome.
Yeah. It's my second home. I've spent many lives there, I can feel it, but also I've had many readings where I've just had many, many, many lives there. So it sometimes feels like more home than Australia does. But I know I'm in Australia because I believe, like in this incarnation, because I believe this is the country that can really make a change. We have every opportunity
Here in Australia?
Yeah, to make a change in the way things are done. We really, like renewable energy, education systems. We're small enough, but yet big enough to make an impactful change that could change how other countries do things.
Okay.
Yeah.
And Katie, there's a question I ask every guest, which I'll ask you after this first question.
Okay.
So there's two more questions. The next question is, what would you say to someone who might be listening, who is thinking that, oh God, I might be addicted to drugs, I might be addicted to alcohol, I might be addicted to anything. It's a tough question, but I mean, what sort of general advice would you have for that person?
So what I would say is go for 30 days without a drink or a drug. Just go for 30 days. You know, your normal drinker can do it, no problem. And now, if you want to actually go down this journey, you need to be prepared to get really, really honest with yourself. So on that path of the 30 days, I would be journaling and I would be writing down what's going on. So noticing whether you're, a lot quicker to be angry, a lot quicker to be frustrated, if you're obsessing about it, if you're thinking about it. And I think that's a really good start, like just trying to go sober. If you're a really heavy drinker and the idea of putting down a drink absolutely terrifies you, then I would be speaking to a therapist of some sort or a doctor, because if you are an extremely heavy drinker, you might go into the DTs and you might actually really hurt yourself physically. If you think that you might have alcoholism or addiction, there are plenty of 12-step programs out there that you can look up online, and there's lots of meetings.
Yep.
But there's also, there's this wonderful woman, Ruby Warrington, who's written a book called Sober Curious.
Yeah.
Now, she went to meetings because she felt she was drinking too much, but she couldn't relate to anyone in the rooms. Now, I relate to that. I remember when I first went into the rooms of recovery, I wasn't relating to people because I didn't want to relate to people. There were sparks of, oh yeah, but there was this huge overwhelming sense of like I didn't want to relate because I didn't want to be. But there are people that are possibly drinking too much that aren't. That don't have this disease, as it's so called. But this book, Sober Curious, I haven't actually read it myself, but I've listened to quite a few interviews with her, and I just think it's a really, like, I've got a girlfriend right now who read the book, and she's not drinking at the moment. She's not one of us, but she definitely was partying too much, because she'd just kind of gotten into the swing of that. So, and you know, in this day and age, a lot of people are drinking and a lot of people are taking drugs. And I would say it's down to this Kali Yuga as well. You know, people are feeling so separate from the divine that those, like they say, it's replacing the spirit with the spirit, you know. So I say people are getting that feeling that their soul is actually yearning for through a drink or a drug. So it is hard to look at that stuff and to maybe put down the drink because, you know, it seems to be that that's what everyone does. But what I would say to that is there's a whole other world out there. You know, I was terrified when I first got sober. I thought, what am I going to do? I'm a DJ. You know, I'm a therapist as well, but I, you know, that was my life. That was my world. And it took me a good year, and it might sound like a long time for someone, but it took me a year to learn how to be in the world sober. But it was worth the work because now I'm free. I don't have to have that stuff to be able to have a conversation. I wouldn't have been able to do this with you 3 years ago. No way.
Yeah.
No way.
That's a good test, isn't it, for someone who's sober curious, or just thinking, oh, geez, there might be someone, try stopping for 30 days, see how insane you go. But I want to say an important thing for me, which is something that I learned, was, my God, the community of recovering alcoholics and recovering addicts stick together. There's such a good bond of, just the support. It's like you leave the world of addiction behind, where largely you're incredibly isolated and disconnected in spirit, which is something I think you've been referring to this whole time, that's the spiritual malady, that's where you just feel complete, and that the drugs fill up that hole. But for me, that, and I don't know if you've found, but the connection with other human beings in recovery is so worth.
Yeah, and I think that was what helped me to be able to connect with non-addicts and alcoholics, was like that. My first port of call was other people that knew how I operated and knew how my brain worked, and they just loved me anyway. And then through working a 12-step program, I developed my conscious contact with God, which is actually what I'm here to do. And then through doing that, I'm able to find the God in every single person, because we're all God.
Totally.
Yeah, but I couldn't see that before, because I couldn't see it in me. Yeah.
Final question, and it's a bit of a cliche question, but it's the title of my show. So, do you think addiction is a gift, or can addiction be a gift, and if so, why? Yeah,
definitely. I truly believe that my soul signed up for this. We come to earth as souls and we forget. We come into these human forms and we totally forget that we're actually divine. And so the process of being an addict or an alcoholic is, if we're lucky, we spiral and we hit a rock bottom, or we have a spiritual awakening, like what happened to me. But in saying that, with my spiritual awakening, I was also then able to see that I'd been living at rock bottom for quite some time. So I just thought I'd add that in.
But that's interesting, isn't it? Because some people say, they hit rock bottom once. But, I mean, you can be dragged along rock bottom for a long time, can't you?
Totally.
Yeah.
Everybody's different.
Yeah.
Everybody's different. Everyone's journey and into the recovery is different. But I definitely would say it's been a gift for me. I can only speak for myself that, getting so far away from God and being so lost and so desperate and so alone and in so much pain, that I was open to hearing a message. Now, if I hadn't been in that place, I still would have been under the guise of my ego that was telling me that I knew how to do this thing. That I had it licked, that I had it sorted, that I had it, that I knew, So for me to get to that place of like, oh my God, I actually have no idea how to do this. I have no idea how to do life. I have no idea how to be or exist without that stuff in my system. I was desperate. And so I was able to hear some suggestions, and then it led me onto this amazing path that has been so much bigger than just like being sober. Like I'm a spiritual aspirant. I have dreams and goals of having a school that helps children to grow in connection to the divine and to the earth. I have beautiful, deep and meaningful relationships with other human beings. I'm able to wake up today. I don't have that dread like I used to. I'm excited about what the adventure of this day will bring. Like anything and everything is an adventure now, rather than I'm no longer in that victimhood of, oh my God, what's going to happen to me today? It's like, oh my God, what's going to happen to me today? It's totally different.
That's fantastic. Do you have a gratitude sort of
Sometimes, but I really make a conscious effort with gratitude when I can feel the fault-finding mind has taken over, which can still happen.
Okay.
I'll find, that I'll be in that period where I'm like, everything's bad and this is happening, and I'm like, I need to get into some gratitude, because I have got a lot to be thankful for.
Sure. It's hard, isn't it? Because that's the default setting for my brain, at least, is that critical voice in the head. It's there so often, and trying to overcome it.
Though, after a few years of doing this stuff, I'm more in the bliss and peace and joy and light than I am in that.
Okay.
Yeah, it's the scales have tipped now.
Yeah, that's good.
To the other side.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've obviously got a lot of work to do on myself
Look,
because I get moments of it.
Yeah.
Little glimpses.
Yeah.
And for me, it's like, I just want that so badly because the existence of living in my head is torture.
Yeah, but I truly believe that this existence that I'm in is available to every single person being alive. You know, it's a matter of doing some consistent work and choosing. It's choosing. You know, like there are days where I haven't been able to see any good, but I've chosen or I've asked for help to like make a call to someone else to help me to pull me out of that mud, you know, that real heavy darkness, you know. But I think when we've operated in that place for so long, we're changing neural pathways, and that takes time. And it takes consistent work too. It's so easy to go down that old track.
Yeah, we can't get away from it. I think on that, is the greeting? Is it namaste?
Yeah, namaste.
Namaste, Katie. Thanks for
Namaste.
coming
Thank
and
you,
speaking
Bertie.
to me. It's been awesome.
Thank you. Thanks
Cheers.
for having me.